This week, President Trump deploys the National Guard while putting on a military parade in D.C. Does this make him an authoritarian? Our panel weighs in. Then, are voters buying the legacy media coverage of the protests in Los Angeles and other major cities? And big economic news as China and the United States agree to a trade deal. These stories and much more straight ahead this week on The Lion Week in Review. Welcome into this week's edition of The Lion Week in Review. It's a weekly look at the culture, the courts, your state capitol, and your kids. I'm Chris Stigall. Now let's meet our panel. The men and women behind the scenes here at The Lion and the Herzog Foundation at large. Josh Mann, our managing editor at The Lion. Michael Ryan, executive editor. And Melissa Oden, our newest member of the panel and part of the Herzog Podcast Network. You can catch her show, host of Life Beyond Abortion. Panel, welcome all as we dive in. The week is largely going to be dominated by the riots of L.A., if that's what you want to call them. It kind of depends. We're going to get into the sights and sounds of what we've been seeing and hearing on cable news and the like coming up. But I thought I'd start with the Lion making news again in Washington, D.C. in the Oval Office, Josh Mann.
That's right. What a privilege. Our reporter Maggie Little was called last minute into the Oval Office for a briefing. Trump was meeting about forest fire management and kind of emergency management with a couple of governors and the cabinet member from the USDA. But we got the last question in about Saturday's military parade. This is a huge deal going on, and our reporter asked the president what his message was for adversaries as he looks forward to the parade. And, you know, I think we might have been thinking about foreign adversaries, but Trump was thinking about anybody who might want to disrupt the parade, and actually broke a lot of news around the nation for saying if somebody wants to protest, they'll be met with a heavy presence. And so that was pretty special for us to be in there, but also just so much is happening at the White House and in D.C. It's really important that families understand what's going on, how it affects them, and so stay tuned to The Lion because there's more of this to come.
It's great work from Maggie Little, and congratulations on the scoop, again, in the seat of power there. That's really cool. Michael, the concept of this military parade broadly, I wanted to ask you, and then Melissa, I'd like to get your opinion too. The critics that say this is Trump as a king, celebrating his fiefdom and keeping people fearful for speaking out against him and this sort of thing. Do you think, let me just ask you just broadly, do you like the idea of a military celebration?
I really do. And normally you would associate the kind of show of force you're going to see in this military parade with some of the more authoritarian governments around the world. But this is a very important moment in American history. The heavens seem to be aligning for a renaissance in civics and national pride and patriotism. You've got the Trump presidency, and he's really into America. You got July 4th, you got the Army's 250th celebration in the parade on Saturday, and you got America's 250th birthday next year. So this is really an important moment in American history, in my view. I've been kind of studying civics for decades now, and we've got a real crisis in civics. And because of all of this confluence of things that are happening right now, there's a movement in the country toward civics, toward patriotism, and all kinds of civics projects are popping up all over. I think Glenn Beck just announced that he's going to do a civics project. And then you got the American Miracle movie, which I wrote about recently, that's coming out. Actually, it was in theaters this week, talking about the miraculous birth of America.
Melissa, it's an interesting point, and it's kind of juxtaposed against this Mexican flag-waving nonsense in the streets. We seem to be having a resurgence of patriotism. Is that what this is? And do you get the sense that most of the people are with it?
I do. And, I think it's really interesting that we continue to see patriotism pathologized in many ways, that somehow America is not worth celebrating. And those of us who do love our nation and are willing to raise our children and our families in such a way to know our history and celebrate that history, somehow we are the bad guys. So I just love that this is a movement that we get to experience and our children do as well.
Michael, I'd ask you quickly, just to follow up on that. Do you think, and I think we're going to show some polling a little later in the show that kind of confirms this, but I'll just ask you generally, do you think that with every passing day, these protests, waving foreign flags in the streets, is that not driving people directly into the arms of the Donald Trump movement, if that's what you want to call it, the MAGA movement?
Yeah, I think they're really overplaying their hand here with the Mexican and Palestinian flags being flown and the American flag being burned. I think that's really terrible optics for the left and for the Democrat Party. And you notice that the Democrats, high-profile Democrats, are really kind of on their side and not the side of law and order in the country.
In fact, this op-ed right now at readlion.com on the issue of who's behind the ICE riots, that's critically important. And I know, Michael, you've done some interviews and some conversations on now maybe some congressional inquiries into this.
Yes, I had the privilege of interviewing Josh Hawley, the Missouri senator, this week, and he has a subcommittee that's looking at who's behind, who's funding, coordinating these riots. And he has sent a strongly worded letter, cease and desist letter, asking for all kinds of records from this organization called the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, or CHURLA, who he says credible reports indicate that they're one of the groups behind all this. And one of the points of my op-ed on The Lion is you really need to look at this systematically. You need to look at this kind of logically and say, you've got to educate yourself first outside the parameters, apart from the legacy media, because they're really not telling the story. And then after that, you need to think through it logically. The question, I think the core question here, and I asked Senator Hawley his opinion on this, is whether these protests are a humanitarian mission. And he even laughed at the notion. It's clear to him and to others that this is not a humanitarian mission. The open borders was not motivated by humanitarian motivations, because too many people died. I mean, people died on the trek here. Americans have died. Kate Steinle, Laken Riley. Americans have been raped and killed on the highways through DUI. And so if it's not humanitarian motives that has led to all this, you have to think it's political motives. And obviously you have to look at the Democrat motives to bring and keep illegal immigrants here so that they can, A, be counted in the census for congressional purposes, and B, vote.
Josh, on my other broadcast, I talk with listeners who sometimes seem like they despair when they see the images on television, on cable news, of what's going on in major American cities. I'm quick to remind them, though, and I do wonder if you would concur with outlets like The Lion at readlion.com and all the media that exists today. Do you think most people watch this with skepticism now versus maybe a few years ago when they believed this was organic? Because there's a lot of evidence, as Michael was saying, that this is wholly theatrics and not organic at all.
Yeah, I suspect so. I mean, I think we're not that far from November when the country overwhelmingly voted for a president who would enforce the border. And so I can't think that Americans really have too much sympathy in terms of the viewpoints being expressed by rioters, whatever their motivation, which is itself suspicious. But even if a few are sort of true believers and sincere in their rioting and protesting, we know that a vast majority of Americans want the border to be secure, and they're actually in favor of ICE officials making these arrests. I just was curious, how many arrests are being made? How many raids are actually occurring? And there are dozens and dozens, but it's not like thousands of raids across LA. So the whole thing has been drummed up, and I think, Michael raises a good point, and Senator Hawley is investigating, and others are suggesting different organizations that are funding it. And so we have to get to the bottom of it. But if you believe the legacy media and the Democrats, it's Trump's fault. And so clearly there's a lot of politicization of this and political points trying to be scored.
Melissa, The Lion also covers cultural stories like this one. Some 20 Planned Parenthood clinics have closed this year alone. I know you follow this issue closely. It sounds like the big, beautiful bill may defund it entirely. What do you know?
I have to think that if, when you're reading through this and we know that they lost Title X money for family planning, the first question would be, does Planned Parenthood really focus on family planning? There's question number one. And I think the other question is, if this is 20% of your business model and you have to close your clinics because of losing 20% of your business model, there's something wrong with your business model. Again, it's about critical thinking here, but it's the typical, right? The sky is falling, doom and gloom. You read those quotes of folks with Planned Parenthood saying, right, we are being attacked and people aren't being able to have access to their health care. Come on, let's peel away the verbiage and realize this is not about restricting access to health care. It's about Planned Parenthood closing clinics because of abortion.
And taxpayer subsidized abortion at that, right, Melissa? As I understand it, a great deal of their funds do come from all taxpayers.
Absolutely. We have been funding Planned Parenthood to the billions of dollars, right, when you look at year after year after year. So I'm excited for the big, beautiful bill and to see what comes of it. Let's take 20 abortion clinics and close, the multitudes of that.
And Michael, on the economy, while we're at it, the big, beautiful bill, that's one of the key tenets, tax cuts in this bill. The president would have that's got to happen, or big tax hikes in the new year. But sounds like a deal with China. Sounds like inflation is still low. Seems positive so far.
Yeah, let's play that clip of the media celebrating the economy. Oh, wait. We don't have one. Look, inflation is down more than predicted, and it was predicted to be down. The World Bank has just agreed with Trump that we're being treated really poorly by countries around the world in terms of tariffs. Federal Appeals Court has ruled in Trump's favor that tariffs can continue. The China deal appears imminent. And the media need a new attack line on the Trump administration, apparently.
And Josh, one more story before we head to break on The Lion. More parents now insist on finding the right environment for their kids, according to one report you guys have chronicled at The Lion.
That's right. This was a survey of what the surveyors called activated parents. These are parents who have made educational decisions or switches of some kind for their children. And 1 in 4 of those families now enroll at least one of their children outside the local school district. These numbers have been increasing since and during COVID, but continue to climb. Also, for these parents who are making educational changes, many of them cite safety and learning opportunities at the top, and we've seen this trend too. A lot of parents are concerned about safety in schools, and that's leading them to look outside of the public school system. We saw this rise, especially during COVID, but it's come down a little bit, but we're seeing a lot of bullying, a lot of other kinds of violent activities. Even teachers are leaving the profession because it's so difficult in their classrooms. And also homeschooling and virtual school families are extremely satisfied. Those parents who've made that switch actually are reporting a lot of satisfaction. And so we're just continuing to see families enjoy choices, exercise these educational choices, and I don't expect that trend's going to, it's just going to keep going up.
All these stories you've just heard discussed, you can catch at readlion.com. Panel, thanks. When we get back, the sights and sounds from the week in cable news when the Lion Week in Review rolls on. Welcome back to the Lion Week in Review. We're back with the panel, Michael Ryan, Josh Mann, Melissa Oden, and the sights and sounds from the week largely have, the oxygen has been sucked out of the room with the riots centered in L.A., but they're starting to grow in other cities. It's been interesting the way the media has characterized it. I thought I'd get the panel's reaction to some of what the media has had to say, at least about what's happened in L.A. Watch.
Demonstrations had been going on right outside the Federal Detention Center. Most of those demonstrations were very peaceful. They were chanting, they were shouting. People were driving by, honking their horns. Some of them went onto the property, started tagging the building, started banging at fences.
And even those who were out of step with what we are advocating, peaceful protest, did not create any violence. Nobody was shot. Nobody was killed. There was no violence. I was on the street. I know.
We are having an administration that's targeting peaceful protests, people that are there to protest.
Most of the crowds, again, that I saw, that I spoke to, that I was interacting with, these are peaceful people that want to get their message across. They brought signs.
Well, California's governor doesn't want the federalized system here. He says he's got it under control. There's no shortage of law enforcement.
Well, if he was doing his job, then people wouldn't have gotten hurt the last couple of days. We wouldn't have officers with a shattered wrist from bricks being thrown through their vehicles being burned, flags being burned in the street, and Molotov cocktails being thrown. Governor Newsom has proven that he makes bad decisions.
In downtown Los Angeles, or just a group that splintered off happened to find 5 cars that they were able to light on fire, and it makes it look like it's a lot worse than the situation actually playing out on the ground.
That's the quintessential question when you have rallies, demonstrations, riots, if you will. I wouldn't go far as to call it that. I know President Trump had tweeted about riots and looting. I don't know that I would characterize it that way.
It could turn very volatile if you move law enforcement in there in the wrong way and turn what is just a bunch of people having fun watching cars burn into a massive confrontation and altercation between officers and demonstrators.
You know, Michael, a bunch of people having fun watching cars burn. That is a legitimate news outlet in Los Angeles, the ABC affiliate. This is what I was asking in the earlier segment. With the preponderance of media today, that's almost unbelievable that that's the position many media outlets had this week.
Yeah, I mean, they're intellectually painted into a corner, aren't they? This just in, though, most Europe was peaceful in World War II. You know, if 2,000 people are peaceful, but 500 are not, then that's not much solace, especially to the people who are injured or the businesses that are hurt by all this. Most people in the world will be safe today, all right? That's not news. What's news is when they're not. And people at these protests have not been safe.
Here's the LAPD police chief this week and his characterization of what was unfolding.
When I look at the people who are out there doing the violence, that's not the people that we see during the day who are legitimately out there exercising their First Amendment rights and to be able to express their feelings about the immigration enforcement issue. These are people who are all hooded up. They've got a hoodie on. They've got face masks on. They're people who do this all the time, get away with whatever they can, go out there, from one civil unrest situation to another, using the same or similar tactics frequently, and they are connected. Some would call them anarchists or by any other variety of names, but they're people that we run across routinely city to city, and this is what they do. So even more disgusting that many of the people who are doing this come in from other places just to hurt people and to cause havoc.
Especially of the graffiti that is just blanketing a number of blocks, has been extensive. We are 1 year away from the World Cup. This is about beautifying our city and bringing our city together. And so I am calling on business leaders, community leaders, faith leaders to come together downtown in the next few days to talk about how we are going to clean up the city. Obviously, city workers are already out there removing the graffiti, but this is so extensive, it's going to take community-wide involvement.
So it's noteworthy, Melissa, that the LAPD chief early in the week identified that this was a coordinated effort. He called it anarchists. He talked about the violence. Then you have the mayor asking for the community to come in and help clean it up. So this is not a couple of people having fun watching cars burn, according to the leadership there in L.A.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here thinking it feels like gaslighting by the media, right? Or it's cultural gaslighting of, that didn't happen, or it's not happening the way that we want you to believe it's happening. It's complete nonsense. And so, I mean, I think that people are getting attuned to what's happening, right? That we can now realize that we have been lied to by the media for so long and manipulated. And it's like everything else, right? Progressivism is never happy with what they have. And so they take a misstep and they put their toe over the line. And I think this is a great example of that. So Trump's reaction to it is to call in the National Guard and the Marines. There's been a lot of consternation about that. Gavin Newsom and others, like the Democrats you'll hear here, Bernie Sanders, and interestingly, because we cover education here a lot, the head of the NEA, Rebecca Pringle. Take a listen.
What is your response to the fact that the president has ordered 2,000 National Guard troops to California?
Look, Donna, we have a president who is moving this country rapidly into authoritarianism. This guy wants all of the power. He does not believe in the Constitution. He does not believe in the rule of law. We just celebrated a few days ago, June 6th, the American landing at Normandy, which began the invasion of Europe to defeat fascism and Nazism. Those guys died. They gave up their lives to defend democracy, not to have an all-powerful ruler in the United States of America.
Enough of the ice raids! Enough! Of the cruelty and the hate! Enough! Of the division and disrespect! Enough! Deliberate and unafraid, we will say everyone is welcome here. We the people, we the people, we the people. All of us have that right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of justice.
Yeah, that's, again, the head of the NEA, Rebecca Pringle, who said in that rant at one point that illegal aliens were who helped build the country. A couple of interesting bits of historical framework there, Josh. Your reaction?
Yeah, it's, I think, the pursuit of happiness, actually. But in any case, the president was elected by the American people. It's one of few officials that we as a people across states elect. I'm sympathetic to any concern from any American about federal authoritarianism. Hey, I'm an American. I'm a constitutionalist. Let's keep that on our radar. But what the president is doing, it seems to me, is defending his agency, who he is directing to crack down on illegal immigration, which actually he was elected to do in November. I think both sides agree that the American public wanted this. So I don't see it as an authoritarian move. But there are political points to be scored on both sides, and so I think that's what we're seeing. Just wasn't a great bit of articulation from the left on those.
Yeah, and
from Bernie or Pringle.
That's right, and some historical revisionism, I think. Michael,
Yes.
your reaction to, and I want to play for you, Donald Trump not backing away, not apologizing, and we'll play for you as well the clip of our own Maggie Little in the Oval Office talking about the upcoming celebration on Saturday and what happens if anybody tries to get involved there. Take a listen.
If there's an insurrection, I would certainly invoke it. We'll see. But I can tell you last night was terrible. The night before that was terrible. We have, as you've seen, it was on most of your networks, people with big, heavy hammers pounding the concrete and pounding curbs, pounding it, breaking up and handing these big chunks of concrete to people. And they were taking that concrete, going up in bridges and dropping it into the roof of a car. They were throwing it at our police. They were throwing it at our soldiers that are there. And we got it stopped, and we have them in custody right now. Look, if we didn't get involved, right now, Los Angeles would be burning, just like it was burning a number of months ago with all the houses that were lost. Los Angeles right now would be on fire, and we have it in great shape. I'm not playing around.
Not playing around. Let me just, for the lack of time that we have here, Michael, and I want to get your reaction on the other side of this. Here's Harry Enton, our favorite pollster over at CNN, confirming what I think we know here in Trump's response.
If we just take a look at the baseline numbers here, this is Trump's net approval rating on immigration. It's gone up like a rocket. Compare now versus 8 years ago during Trump's first term. Look at this. In his first term, Trump was way, way, way underwater at minus 21 points. But look at this. He's up over 20 points. Now, in the aggregate, he is in positive territory at plus 1 point on his net approval rating. Some other polls even have it a little bit higher than that. There is no issue on which Trump is doing so much better than he was in his first term, more than the issue of immigration. Start off on the fact that immigrant citizens, immigrant voters, foreign-born voters have gone tremendously to the right on this issue in 2024 and 2025 versus where they were in 2020. Closest to or trust more in immigration. You go back to 2020. Democrats, get this, held a 32-point lead on this issue. Immigrant voters were in the Democratic camp. Jump forward to 2024, 2025. Look at that shift, a 40 point shift to the right among immigrant voters.
Hello, McFly. It sounds to me like we, the people, like she's talking about, support this. The polls show that. But you got to love the left's playbook. It is A, create chaos, B, complain that it's tyranny to stop it.
When we get back, final thoughts from the panel as the Lion Week in Review rolls on. Welcome back to the Lion Week in Review. Back with the panel, Michael Ryan, Josh Mann, and Melissa Ohden. We always like to turn it over to the panel for their final thoughts on the week to wrap it up. We start with you, Michael.
Yeah, a couple of things. Number one, on the riots, I think Americans would be best served to keep their powder dry on what's going on. They're looking into whether this is actually a criminal organization that is staging these riots. So they're looking at possible RICO charges. And on the school choice story that we talked about, school choice is the education freedom, is the civil rights movement of our time, and it's winning. And it's one of the most underplayed stories of our day. The fact of the matter is that parents' biggest problems going forward may be sorting out all the great options for their kids.
Melissa Ohden.
What a great problem that is to have. You know, I was thinking about that when I was reading that article in The Lion. I started down that path as a parent 12 years ago. I remember when we moved to Kansas City and we had our heart set on private education, but I walked into the public school willing to have an open mind with a soon-to-be kindergartner, literally walked in the building and turned around and walked out within minutes because I knew simply by being in that school office, not being acknowledged, listening to things that were being said, turned around and went down the block to the private school, and it's been worth it time and time again. So as a parent, I love that article. You know, I guess my other point that I think you guys probably love too is we look at Senator Schmidt talking about that remittance tax and the money that's flowing back into Mexico. And, you know, he said it so beautifully. America is not the world's piggy bank. And let's slap that on a T-shirt, a bumper sticker. I will personally have one myself.
Josh Mann, your final thoughts.
Well, we've got a story coming out on The Chosen, the new season of The Chosen, and what the director's asking. Actually, he's got a prayer request, so you don't want to miss out at the Lion. Also, on Saturday, the military parade's happening, and so if you're seeing this as that's unfolding, we'll have a reporter there, and so be sure and look at readlion.com for the latest coverage. And we're on X, Facebook, Instagram, a lot of nice places to kind of see some of that real-time coverage.
Panel, thanks a lot. And as always, as Josh said, you can catch us on social media. If you missed any of this show or want to go back and listen to some more of it or missed previous episodes, you can catch it on YouTube. I'm Chris Stigall. For all of us at The Lion, thanks a lot for downloading and listening to the show, and we'll see you next week.